So now we're going to have a discussion about personal branding. I think this is relevant for everybody, regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're going to work for yourself or work for someone else. Personal brand's always relevant. So let me first introduce our panelists. First, we have Martina Bozic, Hall of Fame 15. She is the Vice President of Football Partnerships North America at SPORTFIVE, leading efforts to grow women's professional soccer. Previously, she played a key role at Major League Soccer, helping launch Leagues Cup and introduce Lionel Messi to North American fans. With experience at IMG Academy, she has expanded global partnerships in sports. Martina's expertise in strategy and relationship building makes her a leader in the industry. Welcome. Next, we have Ashish Manchanda, Hall of Fame 7. He's an award-winning recording engineer, producer, and entrepreneur with over 150 film credits, including The Chronicles of Narnia and, forgive me if I say this incorrectly, but I'm going to try, Bag Milka Bag. He has worked with music icons like A.R. Rahman and was mentored by Grammy-winning producer Bruce Swedian. As CEO of Win Iconic Ventures and co-leader of a media tribe, he's shaping the future of music and entertainment worldwide. Welcome. Then we have Brett Novak, Hall of Fame 9. He's a filmmaker and visual effects artist known for his stunning storytelling. He has worked on music videos for artists like Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, and Lady Gaga, and directed skateboarding and artist documentaries that have amassed over 32 million views online. His work has been featured by Rolling Stone and the BBC. He has filmed in over 25 countries and spoken at TEDx in Brighton, England. Welcome. And then finally, you all know and love Phil Pallen. He is back again. Phil is Hall of Fame 12 and is a brand and AI strategist and keynote speaker who helps businesses and individuals build powerful brands. He's the author of AI for Small Business, a very timely book right now, a trusted collaborator with Adobe, and a member of the Content Authenticity Initiative. Phil has shared his branding expertise on 5 continents and been featured on CNN, Access Hollywood, Entertainment Tonight, The Daily Mail, and many, many others. Welcome, Phil. All right, we're going to start with a kind of the foundations of branding. I kind of want to take it, kind of to the basics here. So let's talk about, and I'll maybe just field this to one or two of you, and if anybody has anything to add, you let me know. What are the key elements of a strong and authentic personal brand? Martina, do you want to start?
Yes, I like to think of a personal brand. It's your reputation. What do people say about you when you're not in the room? What do you stand for? How do you make people feel? What you don't stand for? So elements of your brand is your values. It's what you stand for, what you want to achieve, and what is your story.
Yes, story, and we'll have some questions about storytelling here shortly. Phil, I'd like for you to add anything because I know you kind of started out in personal branding as you're building your company. So do you have anything to add to that about the foundations?
Well, because it's interesting because every single person can answer the question differently. Like, what does it mean? And each answer is valid based on all kinds of factors like experience. I'm always interested in figuring out how do I achieve consistency between the in-person experience and the online version of someone. So like, what makes you great in real life? How do we take inventory of that? And then how do we recreate that online, that experience, so someone gets that experience within the first 3 seconds of landing on your website, seeing you on LinkedIn, or finding you on Instagram. That's, for me, it's like not about embellishing or exaggerating. It's strategic positioning on, really highlighting the things that make you great and achieving a consistent experience online and off.
Yes, yes. And so, Brett, tell me, what do you think are some ways that students, while they're still in school, could work to begin building their personal brand? Are there any strategies, any things they can do, any things you recommend?
That's an interesting question. I think in like this setup as far as today's media with Instagram and social media on these kind of realms, you have an opportunity to essentially begin to kind of look inward of like you get to represent yourself in a particular way that maybe 10, 15 years in a different form of media you had the chance to. So I think this is an interesting timing to be able to like say, it's kind of what's been reflected on, like, who am I as a person and what do I want to, how do I want to transition that into my professional life to some capacity? Yeah, the reputation's a great answer, I kind of find on that realm, because it's true that your reputation essentially is what's going to be the throughput through most of your career, whether that be just literally connecting with other professionals in that capacity. But I think from a brand perspective, it's an interesting time that your face could, very much be connected to your image. So, who are the people you follow that you really connect with? Not just that they're successful and you want to replicate that, but rather who do you resonate with that maybe your kind of image can be in line with to some capacity?
Yes, that's good. And I'll go to you, Ashish. Speaking of reputation, are there any mistakes that you see students make or young people starting out in their careers that maybe they could avoid or mitigate? Has anything ever come up?
I think when I look at myself, I think it was a time when I was a student. It was to build up like a lot of self-esteem and confidence, to basically own up to who you are, and then that translates into everything else that has been said, from consistency, personality, your character. So I think to be very authentic to who you are, and you start building that confidence at this stage. So the earlier you start, I think the better you are, more comfortable you are.
And are there any strategies for building that confidence? Because sometimes that can be hard when you don't quite know what to do. Or do you have any recommendations?
So that's always tricky. Yeah. And I think I must have taken a really long time to find myself in how I'd like to present myself, And so I struggled a lot. And it's interesting because we work with talent across different countries today, and it's all about brand building. So I always surround myself with somebody who is very sensitive to that domain and how to, because it's not something that I am an expert on. So what I've seen is to surround yourself with people who are sensitive to that. These days, of course, there's just so much material, maybe a little too much, on how you build your brand and how you carry yourself or who you are and your own storytelling. But I think the more you expose yourself to seeking, you will definitely find either mentors or people that will kind of guide you and put you in the correct direction.
Yeah, I think that mentorship is a big part of it for sure. And so when we think about students maybe entering the workforce, maybe they're starting their own business or maybe they're going to work for someone else. So Martina, what are some ways that someone could balance building a personal brand while also building sort of the brand inside the company? So if they're working for someone else, it's easy to get lost in the shuffle with your own personal brand. But so how could they approach that? Because I know you've worked for some really big companies.
Yes, I think it all starts with knowing yourself. You have to know your personal why. And I think your personal why and your values have to match the company's values, right? You both have to stand for the same thing. My first job outside of Full Sail University was with IMG Academy. It's the biggest sports academy in the world. It's a 2-hour drive from here. And their mission was to help you to reach your full potential in life. And that aligns very well with my why. It's a massive company. It's part of Endeavor, which owns, UFC, Fashion Week, PBR, Wimbledon. So I think first you have to focus on, do we align? And then you, of course, need to find your authentic way in telling your story and connecting with the audience. My first job was a golf camp sales advisor. And I would say back in 2014, I was one of the first golf content creators on Instagram. And all I did is I just shared behind the scenes how my day looked like out on the golf course with the golfers, with the athletes. And I think that resonated with people. And that's how I really, outside of my resume, built my personal brand. That's what led me then into my next position. I got invited to industry events. But everything goes back into what is your why and how can you share your why with a broader audience, but still fitting under your company's umbrella.
That's such good advice. And so you mentioned, how you were doing the behind the scenes. And someone else, I think, Phil, you mentioned storytelling. So how can students leverage storytelling to build credibility, and we'll go to you, Phil. How can they do that to build credibility, build their brand, build awareness of who they are?
Yeah, well, I think we care about the human and the story now more than ever. That's one thing that AI can't do. It can compute information very quickly, which is extremely beneficial, but it can't draw on human experience, unless, of course, you're taking the time to input that, which I think is actually a lot of what we're doing now. I don't know, I think we're trying to build proof of concept. That's what we're all trying to do, whether you're a full sail student trying to graduate, whether you're a grad trying to get employed, whether you've been in the business for 15 years, I'm still trying to build proof of concept. The ability to give someone the confidence that I'm the right person for the job based on my reputation, based on my experience. So I just had this conversation, I just ran over here from a mentor session, and we came up with this idea like, yes, you need to have portfolio examples, whether it's real life client work, whether it's hypothetical projects that you didn't get paid for. Your client, your employer, the gatekeeper, the decision maker doesn't care if it's something you are paid for. It's still proof of concept that you have the ability to identify a challenge and provide a solution. So I would say strategic positioning is, here's what I've done, here's what can give you confidence that I'm the right person for the job, but also here are my ideas, whether it's a blog, giving your opinion, your perspective on what's happening in the world. Maybe, in my case, like a rebrand that I didn't really like, here's what I would change. Just an example, right? It's not just about your portfolio, it's also about your ideas, your perspective, your opinion, showing how you would go about doing something, I think is just, it's equally important and valuable.
Yeah, and I think just if you could elaborate on this too, is that just so everybody knows, personal branding never stops. You know, I've been doing this a long time. You all have been in your fields for a respective amount of time, right? And it's not something you do once as you're graduating or preparing to graduate, and then it just is done. It's ongoing. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Because it's really like a lifetime. It's a long time thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a living, breathing, evolving brand, same as you as a human, right? We all change, we all grow, and in the same way, your personal brand is reflective of it.
Yeah. And so AI came up, right? And so we're all using, hopefully, we're all using AI a lot. We need to be. But what are some of the ways specifically, and I'll check in with you, Ashish, if you could speak to this, that AI might be changing or impacting how we build our personal brands?
Sure. So we've embraced AI a lot in different capacities, right, from the business side to the creative side. And in some way, we are using it to actually democratize the entry point for, let's say, musicians, artists who are getting into the industry. And we are launching this new platform called the Global Icon, where we are here to make icons really fast. And that we are using AI just for that. A big part of that is actually working with, it's like collaborating with like design institutes. It's a pop culture project, you know, so music is at its epicenter, but we are collaborating with fashion schools. You know, we collaborate like with Full Sail, the music technology schools. You know, so there are ways where it's now just not talent. Everyone is actually sensitive and wants to be a brand in themselves, right? In the way we carry ourselves daily. And so let's say if we are at the middle of this pop culture project, we are using AI to help some things to compute things quickly, democratize, automate those processes really fast. And it's like really, really fast. You know, so it's like things that could have been done in a year and a half, 2 years, you're doing in 6 months, 3 months. So we are bringing that in for talent to help build themselves up really fast. You know, so that's how we are kind of incorporating into our ecosystem.
Great. Anybody have anything else to add about AI? I'd love to, yes.
Of course I do.
Of course, yeah. Thank you.
I think a lot about how, like, the bad reputation it gets, and I think in almost every instance where it has a bad reputation, it's being used as a sign, or it's being interpreted as a sign of laziness or a shortcut, which it can be. But I actually have examples where it's enabling me to do my job better as a brand strategist, which has been my title since I graduated Full Sail. I work with a client, let's say 4 to 5 months. I have calls with the client where I gather information. It used to be that I'd have to manually take notes, try to remember what we talk about, write it down in my scribble handwriting, and now I have note takers so that I can focus on being present in the meeting. Then I can upload those notes. Let's say I'm using ChatGPT on a Teams plan, so it's not training the model on my information. I can upload every transcript from every call that I've had with that client 4 months into it, I can say, hey, remember that conversation that I had with this client the first week about this thing? I can go back and reference that in seconds. And so that's one example of how I'm using it to make me, the human, better at my job. And it's really exciting.
That's a great point, and I hope all of you are paying close attention to that, because I was just listening to a podcast today, and they were talking about how, you know how everybody says today, like, oh, you know, people don't read as well, or they're not trying as hard, or they've been saying that. There was a quote from Plato who said the same thing, right? So it's not a new idea that, oh, we're looking for shortcuts. We're always doing that, right? And there's always some new thing that comes along. In my day, it was the internet. That's how old I am. Now it's AI, right? So there's always going to be something. But if you can figure out how to leverage it to help you, that's the key, right? And so that's why you're all here today, is to talk about these things and how to build your personal brand with all these new things that are happening. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to add about AI? Because it's such a big topic.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it, firstly, because since I started exploring and seeing the potential of this, I use it on the fly. So we had like an investor meeting before we started the panel, and somebody wanted some information. So on ChatGPT, I very carefully feed it information, which is categorized in a particular way. And I needed to send this information where, like you said, you know, you've had meetings over the months or over the years, and you want to create a quick summary of something. It didn't take me more than 30 seconds to draft a quick little email, which makes me look good. Yes. Which captures things that I may have forgotten, or something I've scribbled, or some important notation somewhere, references, citations, etc. I now have access to all of that, and I use, and where I think schools is great is where you can really use this time to become great tastemakers, because that is a training that you have to go through. Otherwise, then there's no difference between students, anybody, any of us, or any smart machine learning program. Then you're easily replaceable. So your individuality, your own personal branding, and your own storytelling, and your own, what I call taste-making abilities into whichever discipline, school is the great place for foundation, awareness, and then use the tools. But just to let you know, something that I would have taken a week or more, work with a couple of assistants, I did it in 30 seconds, sent out the mail. I got a response back saying, okay, I received it. Great, I'll respond to you by the end of the day. That's how quick it is. And it's now my new brand, which is so immediate. And it's now. So it's a reality.
Yes, and that's shows that you're a personal brand who can be flexible, learn new things, you learn new strategies, and you're using it as a strategic partner to help build your personal brand.
Absolutely.
Which is great. Now let's shift gears a little bit, because there is a global component to this, and I know all of you have a global element to the work that you do. So what are some strategies that you have used to connect with audiences beyond your home country? So maybe I'll start with you, Phil.
Sure. I have a story. I went to Japan and delivered a keynote, and I had someone pull me aside and say, I just want to let you know that when you hand a business card out in Japan, there's a certain etiquette to it, and if you don't follow this, it's considered disrespectful. So I learned the hard way that just handing someone a business card is not the way to do it in Japan. You hold it with both fingers, you like turn it and present it, and you play this like reverse game of Jenga, and you put it below the other person. It's a whole art form. I wrote a blog post about it. I learned the hard way that you have to do research before you show up and just assume that you know how things are done. Another example from that same trip, I started talking about Facebook in the context of how I use it in the US or Canada, North America. But Facebook at the time, this was probably about 10 years ago, was used more like how we use LinkedIn in Japan. And so just a few examples of how you really have to do a little bit of homework before you just show up and assume that everyone in these markets does things the way that you do. I've had similar experiences in Brazil. I've had similar experiences in Sweden, where there are cultural nuances that I think you need to make a concerted effort to at least become acquainted with those. You don't have to show up as an expert as long as you have some humility. But I think it's important to just remember that things are done a little differently around the world.
Yes, because that reflects on your personal brand, right? And Brett, what about you? Have you had any experiences in other cultures where maybe there were missteps, or are there any strategies that you use to building your personal brand outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I think it ultimately lends itself back to branding, but I think it's more of like interactions and experience. I mean, I traveled internationally essentially for a living. And especially if I'm shooting skateboarding, it means, the difference between being arrested or not, having the ability to actually interact with local people and local authorities. And, over the years of being all over the world, the difference in, how an American authority figure might have a relationship with something like seeing skateboarding happening versus being in India, and what that interaction looks like, or in Japan, where like the biggest problem with it is it's loud, and so like having like the nuance to be like, okay, how do we do this off where like we're not going to even be kicked out, but at the same time, like I don't want to bum anyone out, I don't want to, like, I need to pull this off. We don't have permits most of the time. It's a whole lot of being kind and learning how to interact in a way with no thought that what we're doing is necessary as far as what they're concerned. And so there's a whole lot of learning the cultural nuance of conversation, and yeah, it's different everywhere I go. I mean, even just learning survivor language where you're flying will go immensely far. Yes, it's true that most places you'll probably end up speaking English, but the fact that if you make some concerted effort, that goes a long way as far how they read you and giving respect towards them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that. My role at IMG Academy for 8 years was, how do I take the brand from Florida to Japan, to China, to South Korea, to Brazil, Mexico, and Europe? And the first thing I did is I hired local experts on ground, and I listened. They know their culture, they know their rituals. So that was the first thing, listen to local experts. Of course, the brand and the why is the same, but you need to adapt it towards their culture so you can authentically connect to the fans and the audience there. So I would say the first thing is listen to the local experts, and then you adapt. Your why, your core stays the same, but you do adapt it towards the different cultures.
It appears that you might have read my notes, because I was going to ask about adaptability, so thank you for covering that. So in relation to that idea, your personal brand is literally everything you do, every action you take, every interaction that you have. And so if you can sum it up, this might be hard, but what are some of the biggest differences between building your personal brand and how your personal brand exists here in the U.S. versus building it in other countries? Are there any notable differences? Because I feel like sometimes because we're in the U.S., we don't kind of see how specific we can be about certain things, and it is, right? And then you go to other cultures and you're like, oh, now I see how that, right? So are there any specific things and nuances to building a personal brand here versus other countries? Anyone want to take that?
I can,
go
I
ahead.
can take it. Yes, I think personal branding in the U.S. Is very much different compared to any other country. I think the US is very aggressive. You have to be basically a salesperson for yourself, right? And that was weird for me. I'm from Europe, and in Europe, if you don't know someone, you don't talk to them. And here it's exactly the opposite, right? So I think the US is very much, you have to sell yourself. You have to be out there and aggressive. Compared to Europe or Asia, where you want your track record to speak more for yourself. It's less in your face. So that was the first thing that I had to learn when I moved to America. I have to be my own hype man, and I have to sell myself.
Anyone else?
I think similarly in the inverse, so since I grew up here, I don't even realize how much it was programmed in my brain to have the very like me-centric, everything is possible, it's going to look a very particular way. It's very, like, Americanism is a very particular thing that when you're steeped in it, you might not understand how specific it is. And then when I started traveling and I would have like interviewers talking to me and learning that, like anyone can pick themselves up from the bootstraps, and it's a very like particular thing, which, whatever you believe ultimately with it or not, it's when you're interacting outside of this capacity, it's very different and it's read very differently. So it took me a long time as far as learning the removing myself from the me-centric aspect and learning that if you want to be involved in other communities, it is community-based, which is very different than the selling oneself. And then kind of similarly, but unrelated, remembering one of my first times in Japan and watching a bow-off for the first time, where it's like two businessmen walking backwards from each other for like 4 minutes, like turning around a building and everything. It was fantastic. Anyways.
I mentioned Sweden. That was the place where I learned that like I had been trained to just self-promote. And then I'm working with a client there who's like, Phil, we have a term in Swedish that basically frowns upon this self-promotion. The requirement of humility. Even in places like the UK, it's not really acceptable to talk openly about your salary or about money. And I have to remember that because I like talking about those things. I like talking about business and growth and strategizing. There's just cultural differences. And I think the best thing you can do is just be curious and humble about learning those. Even if you go into it and you don't know, you'll learn.
Ashish, anything to add on that?
I've had a complex experience, which is a sum of all that's been spoken. And so for some things, I try to, what I call is keep under the radar. So some things which can transcend different cultures. And usually having a slightly softer approach is safer, especially if you're like planted into a new place and you don't have too much time to prepare. So I have gone more on the conservative side, by and large. But having said that, the world as it is evolved today, which is so aware and exposed to different cultures, I have seen that there is a little more acceptance for this cross-border personality to seep in through to other places. So let's say the more assertive, the American style, is definitely permeated into other cultures too. And because in some ways, it is, like they say, the loudest person in the room, does get attention, So, and it depends where. So there are things that I've carried over. Some places I keep under the radar, and that helps me get by safer, without maybe offending anyone or, saying something that may be inappropriate or maybe in your behavior or how you present yourself. So my approach has been a little more conservative in that.
Yeah, I think there's an expression that I didn't come up with, but I like to use it, and it's that you can't see the label from inside the jar. So as an American, and speaking for myself, who's always lived in the U.S. and I've traveled, but you really cannot see the specificity of the American way until you go outside the U.S., and then it is shown to you very clearly that it is so different, right? And it is very specific. So I think hearing all your different experiences is very helpful because I think that for me, if I can just summarize the takeaways, be curious, ask questions, and just be respectful and do your best, right? To be respectful of those cultures, right? Because that is going to reflect on your personal brand. And if you're someone who wants to build your brand globally, which it's a global world we live in, then you need to pay attention to those things. So thank you for sharing those experiences. Now let's shift a little bit more and talk about leadership, because here are a bunch of future leaders, right? And so what qualities make someone not only a strong and powerful personal brand, but also a strong and effective leader? So I'll start with you, Brett.
Oh boy.
This is not a test.
I mean, it's interesting because when I left Full Sail, I worked at production companies, and I had, I think I was young enough and a little too like buck wild about it. I was too very like I know what I'm doing, that kind of situation of like I was decently talented at the timing that I entered the field, but I definitely lacked the life skills of how to listen to people and have a boss, and I was a horrible employee in that respect because yes, I could turn around visual effects shots really amazingly, but also I had no idea how to listen to my boss. So anyways, fast forward X amount of years, I will say looking back, the people who had the biggest impact on my life, who were essentially my mentors, who I would call my leaders in that regard, they were very receptive to me as a person. They were very validating, but also firm. And I think, it comes down to like a healthy parental style of like to make one feel seen. So if you're looking to be a leader, to not just be firm, to not just have goals and to know what you're doing, but also to have the interpersonal skills to validate and actually listen to what somebody is going through, because ultimately we all just want to be seen. Ultimately we want to be heard. We know that everything that we're dealing with can't necessarily be fixed, but it goes a long way to be heard and have the person that you're voicing that to actually feel it. You feel like they actually understand what you're saying and they care, even if they can't deliver an immediate fix. So I would say from a leadership perspective, having those interpersonal skills and caring about the people that you are leading goes a massively long way.
And just to connect back to AI, in my opinion, at least yet, that is not something that AI can do, is to have that emotional connection to a human, right? And so that is a very important, specifically human skill that we bring to the workplace. And so, Phil, you have built a company, and I know you have a team of people, and so have you sort of experienced some missteps as a leader, or are there, I'm looking for maybe strategies that you can impart to these students and these future leaders from your experiences as a person working for other people, but also now as a leader running a company?
I like hiring people, but I hate firing them. So, and having to do that, it's like traumatic for me because I like being good cop, not bad cop. So in many instances of my business, I've had to hire or outsource bad cop because I'm not very good at it. I genuinely care about my clients' goals and my team members' goals. So you're talking about leadership. Like I think I've been told I'm a good leader, but I think it's because I genuinely care about what people are trying to accomplish. And if there's something I can do to help them get there, then I get excited about that. And the fact that I have a job that's allowed me to do that has been really rewarding. But yeah, just as you asked this last question, I've been reflecting that I think my newest team member has worked for me already for 3 years. My brand identity designer that I work hand in hand with every day has worked for me for over 10 years. And so they stick around. And I think it's because I listen, I care. I can't always solve everyone's problems, but I can listen and give people, time and attention and just figure things out when things are tough. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have like a formal book that, or guideline that I follow, but I just try to show up honestly and helpfully for everyone around me.
Yes. Anybody want to add anything on leadership and personal branding?
Sure. So our company became our own school of leadership training. Okay, and I don't think we were very good in the life skill sets, because if we were coming initially from a technical background, then into a creative background, and there was no leadership qualities. You just know how to work with your buddies to get by and make some things happen. But once you start scaling and you're going to run an organization, and we've been fortunate with a lot of the people that we worked with, they've been with us, some of them for over a decade. Okay, so we knew that we were doing some things right, but there were some things that were not going right also. And that came to the leadership team, which was a few of us. And I think that in being the good cop, we found that we compromised on occasion on some decisions that had to be firm. They didn't have to be bad. And I think, gave too much leeway to the team, which was our learning and takeaway over a period of time that too is not good. So it has to be a very dynamic relationship. I've seen as to be in a leadership position, and also that. And I've seen this more with companies and institutions, more on the Silicon Valley side, because we are very in the thick of incorporating a lot of what we call Silicon Valley into the entertainment business right now. And what we've learned is that they think very differently. So, and I think as a student, or when we are growing up, or when we are not in a leadership position, or while we are still climbing up the ladder and building our skill sets, reputation, etc., we give a little too much importance and maybe a little too much to the other side, on the management side, or who are our existing leaders, managers maybe. And I've seen that that's not always a great thing. But that again goes back to building self-confidence, and having great mentors. But these days, there's just so much material out there that you can get exposure on how to prepare yourselves emotionally, mentally, psychologically, in any other way. that I think it is important that if you are going to get into a leadership role, to expose yourself to such thought leaders in different industries, not just in your industry, because some of the best leaders may not be in this industry. They may be coming from other places. So like I know like Stanford has a program where they're creating young leaders when they're 19, 20, 21, and not for 30, 40, and 50-year-olds, because they are saying that this culture knows what they are doing. They've got a good fix on it. We need to make them into great leaders today, by the time they're 20, 21, 22. So there's a whole different shift, and not always that older is better. There is respect for the experience that's gone with some people, but what's coming in the new world today cannot and should not be discounted and stopped just because they haven't had that much of a chance to prove themselves, but the gold is lying somewhere else. So we've seen that within our leadership team, we've become very dynamic, very malleable, and I think there's a lot of trust that is being built with the evolving teams now.
Yes, and I would say even if you're not in a quote-unquote leadership role, you are still a leader, right? Because maybe you are leading whatever project has been assigned to you, right? Maybe you are leading your own job search, right? You are a leader in some way, shape, or form, even right now, right? So if you start to think of yourself that way, I think it sort of shifts how you approach building your personal brand. So I think you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, just in short, I think leadership is about the impact you have on other people's lives. And you can practice and start right now, right? It's in your control how you see someone. Do you bring the best out in them? Do you see the champion in them? Do you empower people? Those are the best leaders, and you don't need to wait until you have a leadership title or position. You can be a leader right now, and you can empower people around you and help them to reach their goals, because that's what I think worked the best for me, and that's how I think impact and leadership is defined.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Now we're kind of getting towards the end of this portion. We're going to be taking questions online and from you all, but so I'll ask the same question to each of you. So I'll start with you, Phil.
Okay.
If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice about personal branding, what would that be?
It's not a race, and it's not really a competition either. I think the best brands are built thoughtfully and carefully. Again, this mentorship session I just had with a student is fresh on my mind. He has some frustrations with his current job, but he has to stick there for about 1.5 years. Some could see that as like, a downside, but I think it's actually a blessing. He has time to plan this next move. And ideally, with your brand, you're not rushing. There's not this urgency that you have to have it done by tomorrow. You'll be able to build this better if you have time to think. Some of the best ideas are going to come to you when you least expect it. So if you kind of create the space to do it and think of it as a marathon, not a sprint, then that's going to be more sustainable and better in the long term, would be my advice to myself, and also advice to anyone in the position of building their brand.
Yes, good. Thank you. Brett?
I think kind of similarly, I guess differently worded, which is to say in the not race aspect, for me, it's allowing it to evolve. I think my mistake probably falls into the category of the idea that okay, I figured out what I like now. I figured out what I want to be known for. I figured out this kind of thing, and therefore I have to lock it in. And then therefore, fast forward 10 years, like how many of you are making the same art or, whatever, just have this exact same interest as 10 years ago? You have a lot that you carry over, but you also have a lot of new things that you've developed skill sets and interests for. And I think in my art, allowing it to evolve from a brand perspective, because I've stopped myself from, I'm making these kind of films as well now and doing this kind of work, but maybe I don't push this to my audience in fear of evolving my brand, which then with enough time, I'm suddenly like, damn, 10 years ago, I wish I started that process already, because I'm even more scared now because it's been even longer. And so, do I make the same mistake again? We'll find out. But, yeah.
Ashish?
Yep. I think even to my younger self, it would be more about, following some of the instincts that I had naturally, and because they've stood the test of time. But at that time, when I was a student and younger, it was that you would doubt yourself and kind of give more value to maybe somebody else who's had a little more experience. And again, that's not always correct. Your inner voice, if you have great ideals, is usually going to guide you well. So I think for me, it was that I could have accelerated something definitely if I stuck to my own guns and stuck to myself much earlier on. But because of the lack of that at that time, I'm also super confident where I am today. So, but I think power yourself with who you truly are. Your inner voice does know what's okay and what's not, as long as you have really great ideals to follow.
Great, thank you, Martina.
I think it's all about knowing yourself. You know, right now you have the time to really dig deep and find out what's your why, what drives you, what motivates you, what is your dream, and really build an authentic story and share how you want to get there. And I think it's all in that. Know yourself.
Great. And I'll just add that there's another expression of the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today. So it's never too late, right? You can start now, but it is ongoing. It will never end. I've been on the earth a long time, and I'm still building my personal brand, and that's okay. And it does meander and change. It morphs, it shifts, and that is all okay. So with that, maybe we should take some questions. So questions, yes.
So I noticed that you guys were given aluminum water bottles, which my interpretation shows that Full Sail wants to be environmentally conscious. So how does that play into your personal brand of showing and also telling what concerns and things to prioritize that might not always be the things that you're putting out?
Good eye and great question. Would somebody like to answer that?
I can share something. So we do, so as part of our project, so we become like an end-to-end company because of some of those reasons, because there were some things that mattered to us a lot for which we decided to take responsibility for. So for example, we do music festivals, okay? All our music festivals are vegan. We don't serve any alcohol. There's no tobacco presence, and it's friendly from kids to any age group. So wherever we can, over a period of time, we have learned that it's okay to be yourself. And then we had the confidence and the courage to go ahead and do it. And you know what? It did not impact anything adversely. In fact, it brought a lot of curiosity, learning. And we would never advertise, we are a vegan festival. No, we are a music festival. Then people would come there and then discover. As we learned, other festival organizers, like there's one actually in Switzerland, yes. And they told us, so they would do like 100,000 people camping festivals every year for the last 18 to 20 years. And one year, the founders, they found that they changed their value system a little bit, and they all became vegan. And then they thought so much that how will they let their audience know that now they're coming for the experience which will be somewhat different. And they did nothing. So we learned from them. Just be yourself. Their whole festival was equally successful, and in fact started a new conversation. So that's how, like, I know from our side, how we've made impact on things that we stand for, and we made it happen.
Thank you. All right, I think we have a question in the back here at the microphone. I think if you have questions, I think they want you to go to the microphone in the back. So go ahead if you have questions and head back there.
Okay.
Right.
Hello, my name is Jose Suarez. I'm a major in music business. My question is for Martina. Martina, once again, thank you for being an extraordinary individual. We all appreciate you being here, and congratulations on your nomination. Well deserved.
Thank you so much.
Martina, my question to you is, how has your professional vision changed from when you graduated to now being a top executive of a global corporation like the one that you work for?
Thank you so much. I feel your love and support means the world to me. And my professional view has changed. You know, in the beginning, it was all about proving myself, right? I was chasing the next title, the salary, the status, making a name for myself. And now I'm chasing impact. Success for me now is empowering you and inspiring you and bringing out the best in others. And it ties back to leadership, what we discussed earlier. So, yeah, it changed from chasing the titles and the salaries to now empowering and impact.
That's wonderful, and that's something we like to call in the Army that great leaders possess of is selfless service, right? Leaving a legacy behind for those who come behind you. So to all of you, like, thank you very much for doing this and taking your time. I know that speaking for myself and probably for the rest of the students, we really appreciate it because one day we want to be sitting down in that chair, right? So thank you.
You will. Thank you.
Let's take an online question, and then I'll come to you. Okay, so we have online, how does one retool a personal brand for a career pivot? Building a new professional network halfway through my working life feels overwhelming. I feel that. So let's see. Maybe let's go to Brett. Brett.
Oh, I get that one?
Well, or
That's a
anybody
Phil
that
Thought
wants
it was
to
going to
address
me,
that.
but it's going to you.
This is a Phil question. I want to become a gardener now, so I'm on this. Okay, I don't have any real advice, so I would kind of slightly pass this to Phil, but I will say, kind of in the evolution spirit of what I said earlier, that I can't tell you exactly how to, but I will say that it's worth it. I will say, again, in the spirit of the, first best time to plant a tree 30 years ago, second best time now, is that, we're all going to die one day. And so, you might as well go out slightly, more fulfilled. So I'll just say it's worth it and then turn to Phil for any slightly better advice.
Well, I don't even know that I have better advice. I would try to be at peace in the discomfort of the pivot.
Yes.
And just try to listen. I don't know that my advice is that different. You got to give yourself space to figure it out and remember what's important, which is you did give good advice, by the way, which is let's try to all spend the rest of our lives doing something that we enjoy doing and that we're fulfilled by. I think everyone in the world would be a lot happier if we enjoyed our work. And so use this opportunity to self-reflect. It doesn't have to be answered by tomorrow, but really think about what is it I love to do? How does that fit with a need that I can satisfy? Every good business satisfies a need. Mm-hmm. And how can I set myself up for success to be able to do that, enjoy it, get better at it because I enjoy it? That's it.
Yes, and I'll just add something because I am at Full Sail for over 16 years because I was part of a layoff during the housing collapse in 2008. So woo-woo for me. So that's how I ended up here. Now, that was a complete shift. I was doing marketing. I was a marketing director. Now I rebranded myself to being in education, completely different. So my advice to the question asker and to all of you is when this happens, because it more than likely will happen to most people at some point, by choice or not by choice, is to say yes. Say yes to things, to say yes to opportunities. Don't be afraid to say yes to things, even if you don't know how to do them. I had never taught before, and here I am, and I love it. Right? So be open to opportunities and say yes and explore things. And like Phil said, take this opportunity to explore new things and see what you love. And so now I can't imagine doing anything else. I absolutely love this. So that is my advice. Yes, question.
I was wondering, have any of you, most of us have any of you ever had imposter syndrome, and what has helped you push through it? This question applies
Great
to anyone.
question.
I'm here, so that's definitely the case. 100%.
I have it right now talking about AI. Truthfully, I find it actually, even though I'm talking a lot about it, there's huge demand for it. But to get up on stage and talk about personal branding is quite easy for me because I've been doing it for 15 years. But I've only been really using AI for 2 to 3 years, trying tools. But I have major imposter syndrome. I'm not Sam Altman. I'm not an expert. I'm not writing code. But I have learned a lot that is valuable for people in terms of productivity, in terms of implementing AI for, to win back minutes, to not necessarily spend more time working, but spend time doing things you actually enjoy. So, I guess just to say that, I'm right there. Even though we're here and sitting here and we're inducted in the Hall of Fame, it's really no different. You'll talk to any Hall of Famer, and as quickly as you can read our highlights of all of our achievements, we can tell you about very real challenges that we've gone through recently or we're going through right now.
They call that new level, new devil.
Exactly. So, you might think it goes away at this level, whatever this level is. It doesn't. If anything, maybe it amplifies.
Absolutely. I'd like to say something, on what you asked and also the previous question, if I may. That I think there's a lot of self-sabotaging that can happen with some people. And I think I've been a victim of that. And where the question was asked, how do you rebrand as you go along? I found out that at one point, early on in life, I would give more importance to what others thought of who you were, okay? And since then, I rebranded myself 3-4 times in my career. And when I meet somebody from my older career or who sees me in a different light of what I was, that's on them. We have grown, we have moved on, but time has stopped for them. And they see us in a particular way, or they would see you in your particular skill set or your role that you were at a particular point in time. And for them, time has not changed and traveled further, but you have. So I have learned to embrace change. And again, it comes with confidence and fulfill yourself into whatever you want to evolve yourself into. And I used to always seek out for, wasn't there a definition for success? You know? And like there's a definition for everything, you know, that you can define whatever. And I did come across, after a couple of years of seeking this definition of success by the gentleman called Earl Nightingale, like back in the 50s, I think so, when there was this radio broadcast that he did at a time when America was going through, coming out of its depression, I think so. But anyway, so this line said, this definition was that success is the progressive realization of one's worthy ideals. So you may be successful when you're a student to have crossed that milestone today. So success is not like one end goal. It becomes a series of milestones. And I found this line, it's so beautiful. You know, for me, it just resonates even today. Is the progressive realization of one's worthy ideals. It's also one's worthy process of evolution of what you want to become, and that's only on you, you know. So I've had the other syndrome, you know, where you sabotage yourself and worry too much about, you know, oh, somebody spoke to me about like what I was 15 years back. Yeah, for them, time stopped then, but not for you, you know. So you just go ahead and move on.
Yeah. All right, did you have another question?
No, that's all. Thank you guys so
right.
much for your time.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
have a great voice, by the way. Great
any other
voice.
questions?
Thank you.
And hair.
Any other questions? Any online questions? No? Anyone else? All right, well, we have a couple more minutes. Is there anything anybody else would like to add?
Real quick to the imposter syndrome situation. It's a worthy question, and I think when I describe Hall of Fame to people outside of this, that's 90% of what I'm saying. Is like, I'm not quite sure why I'm here. Like, this guy mixed all of Beyonce's albums, and this guy directed this movie, and I think with the leaning into the humility of oneself, but also the acceptance of other people's love, to trust that, particularly when people are praising you, to kind of let it be, because it is how they see you. And so I don't need to talk them out of why they think I'm good at something, or why they appreciate my company or presence. And then essentially giving yourself, it's like you snuck in the back to like some really important meeting, and to take advantage of that opportunity. But I will say, probably to some extent, it's a good sign to have imposter syndrome. Probably good commentary on where your humility is at, and also probably a good sign of the way that others view you. Because if you're in that situation, others probably view you in a way that you might not understand that they do.
Great.
Yeah.
Let's take this one final question. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. My name's Matthew Elliott. I'm part of the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting next door. First, I want to thank you guys for joining us today. And my question was for the entire panel. You guys talked about leadership. How do you deal with the adversity in making those decisions for a group or team, for better or worse?
I think for leadership, if I may take that, it's like with anything else in life, it's practice. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And it's not always that you'll take the right decision. So the sooner you start in small magnitudes or small qualities, it'll help you definitely become better. You will take decisions which you will look back and say, wish you had done it otherwise, but that is life. And it's okay, And like they say, this too shall pass. The good times and the bad times. So the idea is that if you are getting into a leadership position, I think that the ability to take decisions, you take them quick. Yeah. You have a team that can think for you. You, of course, make as calculated a decision that you can. But the more you make decisions, the better you'll get at them. That's what I've seen.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, I just want to thank all of our panelists today. If we could hear, thank you, a round of applause for everybody. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you so much.